When I think about my journey with the Fuji X100 series, it takes me back to the very beginning of finding my own voice as a photographer. I got my first Fuji X100 in November 2011. At the time, I was carrying around a little Canon XS700 everywhere I went. It lived on my belt every day until I eventually smashed the back LCD. Suddenly, I couldn't see what I was shooting anymore. I had to point, guess, and hope my composition landed. Oddly enough, that broken screen made me sharper. I relied on the tiny optical window, constantly training my eye. It was like going to the gym, but for composition. That's what pushed me towards the X100, a serious point and shoot with real image quality. Buying it was a big deal. At the time, I was assisting a photographer in Copenhagen, not yet established on my own. But I saved up, bought it, and a few months later I moved to China as an independent photographer. I brought the X100 everywhere. From 2011 to 2014, it documented my entire life, moving from Denmark to Shanghai and Hong Kong. Eventually, it developed the infamous sticky aperture blade issue, stuck at f2. But honestly, I showed it wide open most of the time anyway. That camera paid for itself in memories. Even now, when an old photo of mine gets reposted on Tumblr, I'm right back there again. After selling the original, I picked up the Fuji X100S. It had the new X-Trend sensor, better resolution, and a much faster autofocus. I loved it. Even though most of my paid work was done on a bigger camera, the Fuji was my in-between camera. Always on my shoulder, ready for those in-between frames, walking through buzzing Hong Kong. But around that time, I was switching systems, leaving Canon for Nikon because of the dynamic range advantage. To fund the move, I sold the X100S along with my Canon kit. A few years later, I started missing the X100. I briefly tried the XE4, but with interchangeable lenses, it spiraled out of control. Too many choices. What I really wanted was one lens, one perspective. Then in 2017, I found a used X100F. I even picked up the teleconverter to get closer to a 50mm perspective for portraits, taking advantage of the leaf shutter for flash sync. But by then, the original 23mm f2 lens design was starting to show its age. At 24 megapixels, it couldn't keep up. After 2 years, I sold the X100F. The gap between the Sony system and the X100 felt too wide. Then came the Fuji X100VI. The internet fell in love with that camera. The updated lens solved the sharpness issue and the design felt refined. I was tempted, but I was deep into building my Sony kit, so I passed. Still, I regretted it. On trips, I carried heavy lenses and bulky setups, and it just wasn't the same. A point and shoot on your shoulder is a different experience entirely. You don't ask what lens to bring, you just see in 35mm and react. That discipline is a gift. Which brings me to today, with the Fuji X100VI. This camera took the hype of the X100 and pushed it even further. A 40 megapixel sensor with an in-body stabilization, strong video specs, and the sharper updated lens. The waiting list was insane, but I managed to get one. And I'm glad I did, because for me, the X100 series has always been about more than specs. It's not about having the sharpest file or the most advanced video mode. It's about having the camera that makes me want to shoot. That's why I still use film simulations when I'm out with the X100VI. Even though I mostly edit raw files for maximum dynamic range and my own look, I love previewing through film sims in the moment. It changes the mood of the scene even before I press the shutter. Looking back across these cameras, they've been with me in different stages of life, moving countries, changing systems, rediscovering photography for myself. And that's what the X100 series has always been for me. Not just a tool, but a way of keeping the spark alive. And the video features of the X100VI should not be overlooked. A 6.2K video mode and a 4K HQ mode, which does apply 1.23 times crop. This leaves the perspective you have around 43mm. When you're using the entire sensor, it is line skipped. So if you want the best video quality from this camera, shoot 6.2K or 4K HQ and embrace a slight crop. this camera does have a built-in ND. That ND is designed to go along with the shutter mechanism of this camera. If you want to shoot in bright conditions at f2, you do have to engage that ND filter. Now you can use it also for video, but it's very limiting. You might have to compensate on the shutter, and personally, I like using it in combination with my Nisi 39mm variable ND. Now shifting from video back to stills. This is where the 40 megapixels truly open things up creatively. My first X100 had 12 megapixels. Not much by today's standards, but enough for solid A3 print in my opinion. And with some modern upscaling tools, even larger. What excites me about the X100VI isn't the jump in resolution, it's the freedom it gives. I can crop, I can reframe, and still retain exceptional image quality. Fuji has a really well implemented crop mode settings for this camera. One is for 50mm equivalent, the other is 70. The resolution for the 50mm is 20 megapixels and the 70 is 10 megapixels. So even at 70mm crop mode, this camera has a similar resolution as the original. I have mine set up so that if I pull the focus ring, it toggles these modes. It's an incredibly intuitive way to shoot, especially when you're in the flow. These crops only apply to JPEGs. The RAW file always retains the full 40 megapixels. The Fuji RAW conversion automatically respects these crops, but I prefer the consistency of Photoshop using all my cameras, so Photoshop is a little bit limiting in this way. To bridge that gap, I built a small utility app that detects when a Fuji RAW file has a crop mode applied. If it does, it generates a lightweight XMP sidecar containing that crop metadata. All I have to do is just drag and drop the RAW files into the app, and the files will be generated if there's a crop applied in the same folder. That way, when I open up RAW in Photoshop, the crop appears automatically, but I can still pull back the frame if I want. It's a non-destructive crop baked into the workflow. That's something my Sony cameras can't do. When I shoot crop mode with them, the camera physically limits the recorded data. I lose the outer frame permanently. The X100VI, on the other hand, always captures the full image even when previewing crop. That flexibility is a huge creative advantage. So while my Sony system still rules for commercial work, the X100VI gives me something they never quite managed. It's a small camera that somehow contains both restraint and possibility. And that to me is gold. Alright guys, this video is a lot longer than I anticipated it to be. Before you go, if you're interested in that little application, that software that I made, unfortunately it just works for Mac at the moment. You can either make it yourself through some help with ChatGPT, or there's a link below and you can get it for $5. Hope you enjoyed the video and hope to see you soon again. Take care, have a good one. Bye!
Bye!